Material. Today I wanted to show you an update to our game, which is first launched last Monday. And for those of you who haven't played our last version, our first game is a strategy game set in lands and oceans where as players, you would command troops and capture bases and fight for victory. So without further ado, let's jump right into the game doc. So a couple updates since last time. The first thing we added was we added armies to allow you to stack troops together. So if you look at this picture, on this tile you actually have 5 infantries instead of 1, and I will show you how to do that in a second. But the benefit of that is 1, it allows easier movement, and 2, it allows this army to have a much greater attack strength and health compared to individual troops. The second thing we added is a different type of resource, a second type of resource called oil. And I'll just reiterate the use case of gold as well as oil. So gold is to purchase troops. I'll show you the different expenses, the costs of different troop types in a second. And oil is to maintain that your navies don't get debuffed. So when your ships get debuffed, they actually lose a large percentage of their attack strength, making them very vulnerable. In addition to those two major logic upgrades, we also revamped graphics a lot, and we added more intuitive user controls. So for example, when you want to move a troop or an army to a destination now, instead of left clicking, you do right clicking. So similar to controls in StarCraft and Red Alert, those very classic games. Let's now look briefly at the game objective. So the objective remains the same as last time, which is to capture as many bases as possible within a certain period of time. And ports and cities generate 1 gold per second, whereas oil wells, which is a additional type of building, now produces oil at a rate of 5 units per second. Now let's take a look at the troop types. So the troop types also changed from last time. Now we have 4 types of troops, and among the 4, infantry is the only land troop, so the only type that can move both in land and in water. We removed troop transports for this version. The 3 navies are destroyer, cruiser, battleship, and they change exponentially in their strength, so if you look at their damage per hit and their health, but also in their gold cost, as well as oil consumption. So when you produce a battleship, make sure you have enough oil production for your ships not to get debuffed. Okay, without further ado, let's take a look at the game itself and feel it out. Of a large map that I just created. So now I want to show you first the entire map. Okay, this is quite a land-heavy map. As you can see, there's not much ocean here. Remember that when you first get in, the base that's colored in blue or surrounded by a blue outline is your own, the good color blue. And these uncolored bases and oil wells are uncaptured, and things that are owned by others are outlined in a different, very bright color. Okay, so I wanted to show you first the different panels. On the top left, you see a control panel where you can turn on sound effects. I'm going to turn it on for now, so you can see some sound effects. On the top right, we have the 2 types of resources, gold and oil. So for gold, the balance does matter because we need the balance to purchase troops. For example, right now we cannot even buy a battleship. We're too poor for that. And because we only have 1 port, our production rate is 1 per second. Right? So you see gold increases 1 per second. Oil, the balance doesn't matter, only the rate matters. And right now, since we don't have any oil wells, our production rate's 0. And since we don't have any navies, which are the things that consume oil, we don't have any consumption. So we're perfect at the moment. On the bottom left, we have leaderboard, and right now we only have 1 base, so we're at 1 point. On the bottom right, we have, if we click on this port, right, we see this panel of things we can purchase. And if we click on a foreign city or uncaptured city, we cannot purchase. So let's go for an infantry to start with. you click on the infantry and you right click at the destination to move it. Now notice how, if you remember in the game dock, the infantry has 5-second cooldown, so it's the slowest unit in this game, and therefore it might seem very slow at the beginning, but it's a feature, not a bug. So now let's use the infantry to capture this oil well. One thing to point out, as you see here, you actually see the army in addition to infantry. And the army is a container for the infantry, which I'll show you in a second how to merge different troops into an army. Now let's march this army into the oil well while I produce another infantry. And you see my gold decreases after I do that. Okay, let's look at the result of the battle. Okay, my infantry actually died because things are probabilistic. Now, let's, instead of attacking it with one infantry, attack it with multiple. So we want to combine infantries into a larger army, which is a unique feature of the game. So in order to do that, instead of clicking on the infantry and moving directly, which I'll show you what happens, after 5 seconds, it says destination tile occupied. And this is because you're trying to move the army onto the army itself. Instead, you want to move the single troop. So you click on the army, you click on the move button, the infantry, and you right click over here. And you see it forms a nice little army. And I want to make it even larger, so I actually want to form a 4 infantry army, at which point I basically have a guaranteed success over this oil well, which has health 150 and attack being 100. Here I see that my health is 800, my damage is 400. So let's wait for that to happen. Great, victory. So I actually lost 300 health, but because I have a very large health, I actually survived from it. And I can see that the 500, but the damage 800 minus 500 is 300 is split across the 4 infantries. So each of them has now 125 health instead of 200. If I want to move an army, I move it just like a single troop. So now I want to capture this base. By the way, after I captured the oil well, my oil production has become +5 instead of +0. And with that, I can produce 2 destroyers because oil consumption is 2. That wouldn't exceed my production, as well as or 1 cruiser. Expanding my empire. And now I have 10 bases, as can be told from my leaderboard status. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Great. And among these, one is a port, a bunch of cities, a bunch of oil wells. One thing I want to point out is that if you look at uncaptured bases, their health is 150, but captured bases have health 800. This is to prevent behavior such as stealing bases from other player. Obviously, you can still steal bases from other players, but it makes it a little harder when someone incorporates, quote unquote, a base into their territory. So now let's try to make a navy, a destroyer. We see that because we are at 20 production and 2 consumption for oil, we are not debuffed, as shown by the outline around the ship. If the ship is debuffed, you will see no outline showing that the ship is debuffed, and there will be a little debuff tag over here. Let's move it here to capture a port because the destroyer cannot move onto the city. One last thing I wanted to show is how to move a infantry out of an army. You just do things like that. And you can only move it to the nearby tile. Great. Oh, so here's an example of another player. Now they're actually not inactive, it's just imaginary player, but you will see other players' bases and ships and infantries like this. Great. Feel free to experiment with different strategies. Watch out for your oil production and your own bases. Make powerful armies out of your infantries as well as navies. And enjoy the game.